Welcome to the Women Inspired Podcast, brought to you by Modern Well, a beautiful woman-centered collaborative workspace in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I'm your host, April Seifert, psychologist, entrepreneur, and self-proclaimed life experience junkie. Each week, I will introduce you to a different woman who is succeeding and inspiring others in one way or another. We'll dive into her story, her successes, failures, and the lessons she has learned along the way, all with the goal of inspiring you to listen to that inner voice who keeps reminding you that there is something you want to take action on. You are so much more capable and powerful than you give yourself credit for. Inside of you is a woman on fire. Let's let her out and see what happens. Here we go. Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Women Inspired Podcast. My name is April Seifert, and I am your host. And today I have another quick little episode for you, a little mini episode, but hopefully this mini episode will have a ton of value for you and be really inspirational and transformational, because the exercise that I'm going to walk you through or talk about today was extremely transformational for me. I recently read an incredible book, and I want to do a couple of episodes on two of the hands-on exercises in that book because, like I said, I found them so incredibly transformative. And I just have this inkling that they might be helpful for you as well, and I had to share them. The book is called Playing Big: Finding Your Voice, Your Mission, and Your Message. And it's by a woman named Tara Moore. And this book is all about helping women set and go after bigger goals in spite of all the fear and uncertainty that we all likely feel. Now, I want to be 100% transparent with you guys. Those of you who have been following me for a little while know that I'm incredibly passionate about people living life to the fullest, moving forward in spite of fear, and ever expanding the boundaries of their comfort zones. However, that passion that I have does not make me immune to the same fears and concerns and insecurities that all of you feel. I battle them every single day. For example, the direction of this podcast and some of the next steps that I'm taking in my broader entrepreneurial work have me feeling completely freaked out. Like, if I'm being honest, I'm battling that fear on a daily basis. And along with those fears comes one heck of a killer inner monologue. That inner monologue sounds a little bit like this. Who are you to be doing this? Do you think anyone's even going to listen to you? Are you sure you have enough experience? You know almost no one succeeds at this stuff, right? That voice is chattering in my ear every single day these days. And I'm recommending to you guys this amazing book because Tara, the author, does a beautiful job of explaining the why behind so many of the barriers that threaten to hold us back from being our biggest selves, from quote unquote playing big, like she calls it. And she talks about things like unique societal and stereotypical pressures that women face that lead us to stay inside of our comfort zones. And some of these things that she touches on, they're frequent times when we have to walk a really fine line. Like in business and at work, people are encouraged in general to be direct and to ask for what they want, right? And to play hardball and to, be powerful and exert power. But for women, research shows that when women do that, they actually face repercussions because somehow they're expected to succeed in business, but simultaneously be nice. And she also gives a pretty thorough history of how women have had to downplay their power in order to survive. Like back in times when we didn't have any educational, financial, or societal power of our own, we had to develop these habits and subtle ways of moving through life and not causing too many ripples. And those habits get passed down from generation to generation. And even though we live in a very different world today, the lessons we learned from women and men who have gone before us still impact us. Every single day, we hear subtle, and if I'm being honest, sometimes not so subtle, messages. We hear these messages from all directions that tell us that our voices aren't valid, that we don't have enough experience, that we aren't smart enough, and that we aren't the right people to go after something big. And all of that takes a toll. We end up developing what Tara calls our inner critic. And this inner critic gets louder and louder as we try to do things that are further outside of our comfort zone, further outside of the expectations that society has for us, things that require us to be bolder and louder and more forceful and more powerful and more passionate and more confident. That list goes on. Our inner critic attempts to function to keep us safe. You know, it's saying like, you feel uncomfortable, you must be doing something that's not safe. Let me squawk in your ear and squash that desire and pull you back into your comfort zone. And in doing that, it cements us in place and it keeps us from growing. Now, beyond doing an amazing job of giving, the history and the background, a little bit of which I just went through, there's so much more in the book, about why and how these issues operate, Tara also gives extremely useful hands-on exercises inside the book to help combat them. So in today's mini episode, I want to walk you through just one of those exercises using my own situation as an example. And I'll forewarn you, this is a bit of a soul-bearing episode. This is not one that is at all comfortable for me. I mean, it just really isn't. Flat out, I did this exercise because I have a healthy inner critic, and given the goals that I have for myself in the near term, I need to quiet that voice down. So that's why I did this exercise. So to do the exercise, one of the first things that Tara suggests is to get to know who your inner critic is. To think about, when do you hear from them? When are they loud? When do you start to hear that little voice in your head that tells you that you're not able to do something that you might want to do, or maybe you're not smart enough or good enough or whatever it is, experienced enough? Then, what do they actually say? Like, what words do they say? How do they go about it? What tone do they use? Does that inner critic, do they sound familiar? Do they sound like anyone that you may have encountered in your life? Maybe it's family, maybe it's coworkers, maybe it's a past, group of friends, maybe it's some other person in your life. Who do they sound like? And from all that, start to think about where you think they might have come from. So I did this for myself. And, like a lot of people, my inner critic gets extremely loud when I'm about to do something bold. When I'm about to put myself out there and do something that requires a lot of courage, that's when my inner critic gets really loud. And what's interesting is when I started to think about the things my inner critic says, they're all things that reduce me to being less of a person than I really am. So my inner critic says things like, you have these big ideas and you're trying to help people in this big way. Nobody your age could possibly do that. Like, you need more life experience. You need to be older. You need to be more, experienced in order for people to take you seriously. Somehow in my mind, and this was really interesting, I had the number 40 in my mind. Like, somehow when I'm 40, people will take me seriously. And then it occurred to me recently, I'm 38. So I mean, if you round up, I'm basically 40 years old and I still have the same insecurity that I've had all along. It's not the number. I mean, bottom line, it is not the number. It's my own insecurity. It's my own story that I'm telling myself. And that is what's leading this inner critic to be able to influence me in this way. Because somehow underneath, I believe what they're saying. I think somehow I'm not experienced enough or good enough. So I started thinking about what this inner critic sounded like and like who they sounded like and what they might look like. And I actually came up with a pretty detailed description of who he is. What I noticed is when I thought back to other times in my life when I've actually felt like a small person, think about being patronized or being treated like a little kid when you're an adult. That's the feeling my inner critic evokes in me. Like that's adorable that you have those cute little ideas. Isn't that cute how she has those little ideas? That's how my inner critic makes me feel. I started to think about times in my life where I've actually felt like that, where I've actually allowed someone to let me feel like that. And what I noticed is a lot of it goes back to this amalgam of messages that I've received throughout my career in situations that have been very male dominated. So lots of times, and I'm going to assume positive intent here. I mean, really assume positive intent. Sometimes things that were said to me and meant to be compliments were not complimentary at all. All they did was serve to reduce me to less of a person or to be patronizing, or at least that's what I allowed them to do. And so as I started to think about, again, when have I felt like that? Who has it been that has, whose voice is it that I've basically internalized? It is men who are older than me in my career who are basically underestimating me or patronizing me in some way. So that actually gave me a lot of clarity. Like, wow, I've allowed their words to permeate me so deeply that I've now internalized them. That's awful. So what Tara suggests that you do then is write a letter to this inner critic and tell them what you need to say in order to help quiet that voice. So today, as I close out this mini episode of the podcast, I want to read to you the letter that I wrote to my inner critic. So I'll start with the description. She suggests you give a physical description of who this person is. So I'll start with the description of who my inner critic is. And then I'll read you the letter that I wrote to him. And I'm doing this because I hope that it's maybe some of you have the same inner critic that I do, but regardless, even if you don't, let this be one example of someone showing you how to go through this exercise, because for me, it was extremely powerful to put this down on paper, because somehow thinking through who he is and the tactics and words and mannerisms that he used while he was saying these things to me, somehow that made them less powerful. And I am so much more able to recognize when he is speaking in my ear, and I am so much more able to put the appropriate perspective around what he's saying and essentially not listen to it. So I really suggest you guys do this episode or do this exercise that I'm talking about in this episode. And I hope that by sharing my experience with it, it's helpful for you in your journey. All right, here's my description of my inner critic. and the letter I wrote to him. So my inner critic, his name is Ron. He is a man. His age is 58. Occupation is senior finance management. Physical appearance, he's tall and big, but not muscular. He has a bit of a beer gut. He has a gold wedding band, and it's kind of tight on his finger as though he's gained some weight. He's clean shaven. He smells strongly of cologne. He's wearing tan slacks and a golf pullover. Other details about him: he's a country club member. He's unhappy in a marriage to a woman who is a stay-at-home mom. They have 3 adult kids, and he barely saw them grow up. He drinks whiskey. He likes high-end strip clubs. He flirts with his coworkers when he travels. He is conservative, and he's very religious. So that's my description. So if you think about who that person is and sort of put a face to that name, here's my letter to him. Dear Ron, for all intents and purposes, we barely know each other. Not in any real way. However, you have had a profound impact on my life. You see, it's your voice that I hear when I dare to dream big. When I dare to believe that I am capable of not just great things, but massive things that feel like an impossibility, your words creep into my mind. Even when I'm at my most confident, strongest, most rock-solid, focused moments, you find a way to invade my thoughts. You confidently walk in, unconcerned that you're entering uninvited. And you take a seat. One ankle crossed over the opposite knee, you lean back and you begin to speak. You begin with a compliment, and it's always the same. You recognize how hard I work. You tell me that you think it's great that I'm so driven and that I'm not like other quote-unquote girls you know. You've subtly told me that being too much of a woman is a bad thing, while simultaneously reducing me to a small child. Then you quote-unquote compliment me again, or at least in your mind, that's how you justify what follows. You tell me how pretty, in shape, and attractive I am. And I catch you as your eyes scan my figure, always lingering for a moment too long on my chest. And I'm reduced again, but this time to a mere physical body here for your enjoyment. I respond by crossing my arms and legs, and I vow to myself to wear less makeup and to stay strong, even though I am suddenly hyper aware of the physical size difference between us. And now you have me where you want me, and you going for the kill. April, you say in a patronizing tone. You don't really think that you're going to succeed, do you? I mean, no offense, but is it something that you actually want? Have you really thought about that? It's going to be so much work. Are you even ready for that? It'll take so much time away from the things that I know are more important to you. Think about your husband and kids. Isn't that time better spent with them? Besides, almost no one succeeds at stuff like this. You'll waste all that time for nothing. What makes you think you're different than all those other people? Why would anyone listen to what you have to say? There are so many other people who are better qualified with more experience. Sweetheart, you're just not credible enough. You need to give up this silly little childish fantasy of yours and stick to things that are more suitable for someone like you. Stop embarrassing yourself and grow up. Ron, I probably should have said what I'm about to say a long time ago. So I realize this may come as a surprise, but be quiet. Your insecurity is completely showing. I have a few things to say to you, and then I'm going to insist that you leave. You and I both know exactly what's going on here. The insecurity and threat that you feel stems from your feelings of entitlement and scarcity around success. You incorrectly believe that there's only so much to go around, and if I grab a chunk of it, there's going to be less for you. And I'm particularly threatening because it wasn't so long ago in your career that you only had to compete in any real way with other men. Nearly 50% of the players weren't even in the game yet. But I'm here now. We are here now, and we're not going anywhere. It must feel even more threatening because it's not just women who are changing. The men you used to be able to count on to help subtly and covertly, yet powerfully, spread your threatening message are a dying breed. And I don't mean that literally. I mean that their minds are shifting and their eyes are wide open to the impact and opportunity of an open and level playing field. And they're wildly more successful because of it. A rising tide lifts all boats. And as more and more women like me enter the game and begin to chase their big goals, and more of your former teammates lock arms with us, the more difficult this will all become for you unless you open your mind and change your ways. And unfortunately, I'm not going to be the one to help you do that. You have held me back for far too long. I've let your words impact me for far too long. You believe that my dreams are impossible, and they will be if I keep listening to you. I have a life to live. I have a legacy to build and people to help. So, in closing, I just have one last thing to say. Kindly, fuck off. I've got this. Sincerely, April. Before we close out today, I want to say thank you to my producer, Cameron Hill, and to my incredible sponsor, Modern Well. If you want to learn more about how you can reach your goals in a one-of-a-kind work-life community, visit www.modernwell.co. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone else who might benefit from this inspiring message. And if you have a moment, click the link in the episode description to leave me a rating and a review on iTunes. It would mean so much to me. Finally, I want to remind you that it is absolutely possible to live a happy, fulfilling life, even in spite of all of the chaos and demands we all experience. Sign up at aprilseifert.com to gain access to tools that will help you do just that. I have carefully created and curated a set of tools that combine the powerful fields of psychology and design thinking to help you intentionally create a fulfilling, happy life you love. Thank you so much for joining me this week, and until next week, stay inspired.